A fart should never be sad. But the first time you hear your parent fart and it's not for a laugh, you can't help but become glum. You both heard it. At least one of you smelled it, so you pretend it didn't happen. But it did. It most certainly did. Worse than the smell or the shame is the shift. The parent has become the child. The child has become the parent. It's only a matter of time until, well, you know. Up until this moment, you both felt as though time was something that only existed for other people. Yet here you are, enlightened on how time comes for us all, thanks to a fart. My poor father, he was too self-conscious and proud to ever acknowledge the fart or play it off as a gag. I can remember as a child when my grandmother farted in front of us, he would turn and point to me silently with a big grin, begging me not to laugh. It took every slice of skin hugging my bones to contain the giggles. The giggly suppression was only enhanced by my sweet grandmother saying, "Excuse me," directly after unloading. That feels like a lifetime ago. I suppose it was. She passed away on my 25th birthday. And now, here, me and my father are in his little villa, watching TV as he goes into the kitchen to refill his Diet Coke, and I can't help but wonder how long it will be until Father Time comes for me, too, and I'm the one farting when my child suddenly sees the cold reality of their future. Luckily for everyone, I don't have any kids. Not yet. Will it happen? I'd like to think so, but I'm knocking on the door of 40 and my dating history looks like a redacted CIA report. Kids aren't for everyone. I just assumed one day I would have kids. I think I'd be a good parent. At least that's what I tell myself. Although my dad had me when he was 45. So I've got some time left if we're being a stickler for the lineage. But then you start doing the math. When my kid turns 21, I would be 66. Everyone would assume I'm his grandma at his college graduation. He would have to spend his whole life telling people I was his mom. She had me late. Her dad had her late. I guess it runs in the family. These are the kinds of imaginary conversations between my imaginary son and his imaginary friends that would sometimes pop into my head like a radio station playing the oldies but goodies. This is what happens when you spend more than a week in South Carolina. Your mind starts drifting into odd places. The reason for my most recent visit was that my dad had taken a fall and hurt his hip. Hurt hips on the elderly can be serious business. And luckily, he had strong enough bones that he was still mobile and didn't need to be situated in a hospital. Or so he says. He moved in fragments, as if his legs were on a delay from his torso. And this is what happens when you're stubborn. You wear the face of a different person when the world knocks at your door. He texted me a couple weeks ago about the fall and how he would have to lay off playing golf for a couple of weeks, which was his main form of exercise, entertainment, and engagement. All he really had was his girlfriend, Kathy. And Kathy was sweet, in the way most people over the age of 70 who are from the Midwest are sweet. They talk a lot, mostly in rhetorical statements or seemingly innocuous questions. She was 15 years younger than my dad. Good for him. That's what people would think, say, or both when they met them. Good for him. Never good for her. Only for him. She looked great for her age. If I looked that good at 50, I'd be ecstatic. When she turned 70, she said, "So begins my golden era." I came down to South Carolina once or twice a year for about a week. The last time I came down here, I noticed that Kathy was asking me questions that she should have known the answers for. "Were you ever a coffee drinker?" That's what she asked me this morning while sipping her fresh cup as I sat on the couch trying to get through the first chapter of Infinite Jest. I took about a second pause before answering. Kathy knew I had been a coffee drinker. Anytime I had been here previously, whenever she was making a fresh batch, she would tell me so, and then offer to pour me a cup. It was one of her 10 most asked questions, along with, "How about this weather? Why would anyone vote for that man? How about this weather? What is gluten? How about this weather? Was there traffic this morning? How about this weather?" My dad was beginning to grow a bit impatient at her repetition. It was only when he told me in confidence that Kathy was having some memory issues did it dawn on me that maybe something more was happening than just being forgetful. Another sad reminder of the power possessed by Father Time. Declining memory aside, I was grateful that Kathy was there to take care of my dad. She was a bit of a hypochondriac, so she was adamant about making sure that he kept all of his appointments. She would constantly ask how he was feeling, which was sweet from the outside, yet I could tell it made my dad shrink with shame. He didn't want to be asked how he was. He wanted to exude a sense of suave and charisma that was dwindling with each visit. My flight back home was open-ended. I was fortunate that I could do my work remotely, which allowed me to spend some quality time with the old man. Better to put in the hours now while he was active and cognitive. Who knew what this living room would look like in 5 years? Would he even be here in 5 years? Such questions are better left unasked. It was bedtime. I woke up feeling refreshed, beyond refreshed. Who needs coffee when your body gets a healthy amount of time in slumber? I was ready to go for a warm run in the sun when I heard from nearby, "Well, good morning. I made coffee. Would you want some?" "Thank you, Kathy, but I'm fine." I was halfway out the door ready for my run before she said it. "Oh, were you ever a coffee drinker?" Kathy had never repeated a question on back-to-back days. There was usually a good amount of time and space between her repetitions, several months at least. But she had asked me yesterday if I had ever been a coffee drinker. Once again, I took my 2-second pause before answering that yes, I had been, but was taking a little break because it helped me sleep to avoid caffeine. Then, without missing a beat, she said, "I like your hair longer." There was something about the ease with which she said that. There's always an unspoken fine line with how people who aren't related to you yet exist within the same family will speak to one another. That felt like a slight dig. For her to comment on my appearance negatively, that was new. That was not Kathy. I could get used to this. This was the feeling that washed over me every time I went to the beach, which was only a 10-minute drive from my dad's villa. Sunny and 75. The high in New Jersey today was 38 with a chance of hail. Hail! The inappropriate uncle of weather forecasts. I could usually get the old man to come with me to the beach at least once during my visits, but he had a recent skin procedure at the dermatologist and told him to avoid too much sun for about a week. He was all cooped up with Kathy, just him and Kathy. I had volunteered to cook that night. Burgers and Brussels sprouts. My cooking had become a celebrated tradition in my dad's villa, as if I was some chef at a five-star restaurant. Everything I made was seen as exotic and sumptuous, even burgers and Brussels sprouts. I was amused by the rave reviews, considering how little effort it actually took to make these meals. I suppose when you never cook, the elementary tasks I completed in the kitchen could be looked at as advanced algebra from an untrained culinary eye. My dad scarfed it down as if he was trying to beat Joey Chestnut in the hot dog competition. Kathy took her time with the food, which awarded her more time to yammer on about things that she had previously yammered on about. Once the final sprout had entered his belly, my dad was off to his recliner, leaving me to be all alone on Kathy Island. I nodded, smiled, retorted, even asked a couple of questions just to mix it up and be courteous. But then she said it again. "Do you want some coffee?" Rather than stare at her for 2 solid seconds before answering, I actually turned around from the tiny dining table, pretending to look at the local news that my father was now watching instead of staying at the dinner table until dinner was completed. The news didn't interest me. What interested me was seeing if he would respond to my response. Would he give me that knowing glance, similar to the shared glance from yesteryear of hearing my grandmother fart? When we dove headfirst into the awkwardness of someone losing their bodily marbles, he did no such thing. I would have to say something. Not now, not in front of her. But this felt alarming. Surely, someone as sharp and aware as my father had to know that something was happening with his girlfriend. It would have to wait until tomorrow, because by the time I had finished loading the dishwasher, Dad had fallen asleep in his recliner. Kathy was wide awake, though. She had just started her coffee. I woke up during the middle of the night to pee, which was not unusual at this point in life. Also not unusual was seeing that my father was awake. At 2:35 a.m., he was in his recliner watching sports highlights on mute while he tried to do the New York Times spelling bee. I sat down next to him and fired up the app so I could play along. "Do you want me to shout the pangram when I get it before you?" "Wise ass," he said with a smirk. It was nice sitting in silence with him. My mom had passed away long ago. It had just been us going on 25 years now. It was rare for any place to feel like home, but this did. Smiling faces beautiful places. This was the South Carolina slogan. Call it my Northeast bias, but it always felt like there was something sinister hiding behind the faces and places of South Carolina. Even in a quaint little town such as Beaufort, Florida was too much of a cliche for my father. That's why he chose South Carolina instead for his retirement. I respect the road less traveled. And I had a soft spot for Charleston, but there was just something that always felt a little off about this retirement community. The people were too friendly. I had similar thoughts on Canada, but we can dive into that another time. Whenever I went to the pool, everyone would just stare and smile, nodding, as if I was being rolled out onto the buffet table. I could hear the hush as I got settled into the lounge chair. You shouldn't be able to hear silence. I wanted to mix it up today. Rather than running in the morning, swimming in the afternoon, and chilling in the evening, I was going to start the day by the pool, hang in the villa for the afternoon, and then go on a run after dinner. All of this was in an attempt to be present when my father was not sleeping. I can't remember a time when he did sleep well. The man never got more than 4 hours of solid sleep in a row. This is what happens when you never drink water. Truthfully, he was a medical marvel. How do you survive without water? Study my father. As far back as I can remember, he had always been a napper. I had tried to give him better sleeping tips on more than 5 occasions, but it was in one ear, out the other. Right after the nap, up until dinner. This was the prime time to hang out with Papa. Today, however, that would not be the case. His nap seemed to be running longer than normal. I had gotten back from the pool around noon, and now it was pushing 5 p.m. 5 straight hours of sleep? Unheard of. Had he drank water? Impossible. Without the old man, it meant even more time hanging out with Kathy, who not once, but twice, looked up the weather in New Jersey while we sat and watched Wheel of Fortune. She seemed to revel in the bitter breeze currently sending a chill up the spines of all my hometown Jersey boys and girls. The glee when she said 29 degrees. It was malicious. For vacation, this day felt anything but. It all started when I had spotted some commotion right outside the gates leading into the retirement community. There was a homeless woman who had to be escorted from the property. I had never seen that before. Not in nearly 15 years that Dad had lived here. Homeless folks were never found remotely close to Beaufort. It had a reputation for being pristine. The entire community was surrounded by these 20-foot high hedges that stayed bright summer green all year long. I checked my watch, 6 p.m. I was getting nervous. I asked Kathy if Dad was okay. She sat there in total silence. I asked again. She slowly turned to me. The way she squinted, it was as if she had never seen me before. Her mouth trembled. Who are you? She was losing it quickly. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. I can remember as a kid seeing the devastation that caused on my father. Her not knowing who he was, forgetting your own son, I couldn't imagine. Now it had dissolved from imagination to reality. Maybe this was why my father dreaded getting old so much. He knew it ran in the family. Without our memories, who are we? Do we even exist? Maybe I could find a home health aide before I left. Surely this community would have an extensive experience in outsourcing nurse care who could stay with her. My dad must have known this day would come when he would have to get her help. I checked my watch again, 6:30 p.m. I had to see if my dad was okay. I knocked on his door. No answer. Dad? I knocked again, louder, twice. Dad? I had to buy shoes. I had never worn anything beyond flip-flops and sneakers when I went to visit him, and now I had to wear shoes. If there was one thing Beaufort was equipped for, it was death. They handled the proceedings with a smooth ease that I was not ready for. This is what happens when the bulk of your residents are elderly. You become well seasoned in the art of transitioning from life to death. They had a deal with a nearby funeral home, a deal with a nearby cemetery, a deal with a nearby cremator. Apparently, Dad had worked all of this out ahead of time with them. It comes with the morbid territory, so to speak. The ambulance, the calls, the wake, the funeral. It happened so fast, I'm not sure it happened at all. I blinked and somehow slipped through the cracks into some other realm. How many people were feeling exactly like me all across the world right now? As if it were all suspended in a collective animation, waiting for someone to click play instead of pause. Dad was gone. But Kathy, it was now just the two of us, together. I had never felt more alone. I wondered when she would finally break down. Was she even aware of what happened? She had remained silent during the entire experience. I had to coordinate everything by myself as she sat on the sidelines being consoled by friends from Beaufort whom had known her and my dad. It made me sick. Watching her freeze in a time where I was forced to never stop moving. Our day alone was brutal. She continued her silence, sitting motionless in her chair, staring at the blank TV. The only time she spoke was when I went to the bathroom. I could hear her mumbling something. It was quick and jagged. As soon as I stepped back into the living room, she would zip right up and just sit there, dead-eyed. What was I supposed to do? Stay? I had no obligation to her. She wasn't family. She was my dad's girlfriend. Where was her family? I know she had some, somewhere. Someone had to care for her. That wasn't going to be me. I booked a flight for the next day. There wasn't a chance in hell I was going to spend another night here. I needed to get away as soon as possible. Staying inside only made it worse. Everywhere I looked, I saw my dad. The recliner, the TV, the dining table. I went for a run. Maybe that would settle my mind. I was surprised to see I was not alone out there at midnight. You'd think the elderly would call it an early night. Not so, not here. Not them. A lap around the community was about 1.3 miles. Every 5 minutes, I would see someone walking. They all had their same guiding light, which was a tiny red lantern that would illuminate their chins, but not their eyes. I would nod and wave as they stopped and watched. This run did not have the intended calming effect I was chasing. I did 2 laps around and then I went home. What used to be a home. I didn't even bother trying to sleep. I just laid in bed, staring up at the ceiling fan. Any other time, if I had been awake at this hour, I would be able to see the outer rim of my bedroom door light lit up by the silent TV that my dad was watching in the living room. But tonight it was just black. There was no light until it turned on. I sat up in bed. The edges of my bedroom door were illuminated. Kathy was up at 2:37 a.m. Should I go out there? The TV wasn't silent. I couldn't hear anything. Maybe this was her pleading for some human connection? A way to signal for my attention? I got out of bed, opened the door, and walked out. The room was empty. Just white static on the TV. His bedroom door was closed. I turned off the TV and sat down on the love seat next to his recliner. The same spot I had sat the last time we had spent time together. Playing Wordle in the middle of the night. I couldn't help but glance over at his chair. I thought maybe if I squinted just the right amount, I'd be able to see his shadow cascading through the moonlight as it danced down the glass of his screen door. I remembered that time he confided in me about how much death scared him. We were eating breakfast at our favorite diner. This was back in New Jersey, before he retired and moved away. I had been dealing with some pretty severe anxiety back then, trying to figure out my life, who I wanted to be, and how I would get there. He never let it out. He always held it close to his chest. But he knew in that moment I needed to hear that it would be okay. And the only way for him to do that was to tell me that even Superman has a kryptonite. I pushed it away, tucked it down in that part of your gut that holds all your fear. Now it was all coming back up through my throat, slithering around my neck, squeezing. I couldn't breathe. The nails were digging into my skin. This was not some emotional unburdening. This was something much more powerful. I turned and it was Kathy. She was trying to strangle me. I tried to lean back away from her grip, but her wrists just tightened. She was squeezing so hard that her face was shaking like a bobblehead doll. She foamed at the mouth. Her bottom teeth looked like they could pop through her lips at any minute. I could have tried to just kick her off me and run out the door, but why pass up this opportunity? I nearly unlocked Kathy's jaw with an uppercut through her chin. She flew backwards up onto the tiny dining room table and then rolled off onto the floor trying to catch her breath. I stood above her. There were a lot of things I could have said at that moment to make me feel better. but I chose the first one that sprang to my mind. I like your jaw broken. We'll be right there, Mrs. Tibbs. I didn't even have to explain who I was or why I was calling. Maybe they were expecting this. They saw the bruises on my neck. They saw the cut on Kathy's chin. I explained exactly what happened, beat for beat, starting from when my father had his heart attack. Kathy remained silent. As we sat on opposing ends of the parking lot, she sat on the black pavement staring at me. Her eyes never wavered. The cops could read the room and saw clear as day that something was wrong with her. Very, very wrong. They put her into the back of the cop car and said that they were going to take her to the police station to continue the conversation in private. They asked if she had any family. I didn't know. Apparently, all 911 calls were routed to the Beaufort security detail, which consisted of 2 security guards stationed on opposite ends of the community. I could tell they were excited to act like real cops even for a minute. I looked at his tiny name tag, Curtis. Curtis finally had a good story to tell his friends who didn't take his job seriously, driving around all day in a retirement community. A brawl between 2 women? That'll take his cake. I said I was not planning to press charges. She was obviously going through something. I explained how she had been acting prior to the assault. The security guard seemed to believe me, and he remained calm, reassuring. He had heard about my father's heart attack. Everyone in Beaufort knew everything about everyone. You couldn't poop without people knowing what color it was. The last thing he wanted was for me to become more upset. Do you have anywhere to go, Miss Tibbs? I asked why I would go somewhere. I live here. He corrected me. Kathy lives here. I was just visiting. Perhaps her memory issues led her to believe I was not wanted there. I should plan to be somewhere else when she came back just to be safe. Seeing how I didn't want to pursue legal action, we can just chalk this up to a misunderstanding between people who were grieving. What a diplomatic way to assess my almost mother-in-law trying to kill me. I couldn't help but feel slightly bad for her. She looked like she didn't know where she was. Maybe she forgot who I was, too. Either way, in about 7 hours, I'd be back in Jersey and Kathy would be here. As I watched them drive away, I went back inside to collect my things. I didn't want my final experience inside my dad's villa to be a knockdown brawl with this woman. Maybe it was for the best. It eroded any future desire I would have to come back. In the off chance that Kathy would return soon, I called a cab and decided to get to the airport. I could sleep there, even though the odds were strongly against that. I said sayonara to the final home my dad ever knew and left the front door unlocked. The cab refused to come inside. I had to walk outside of the community out onto the main road to meet my ride. His accent was thick, and I was having a hard time understanding the reasoning. Del Boca Diablo. My confusion wasn't much incentive for this man to elaborate. I don't think he understood me. The feeling was mutual. He made a cross on his chest and then double-tapped a tiny doll hanging from his rearview mirror that looked like a skeleton. The night was still dark and the roads were empty. The wind was brushing my cheek, and I began to nod off in the car and hit the highway as I was leaving my father behind forever. There was something gnawing at me that kept me awake. If Kathy had forgotten who I was, if her memory issues had deteriorated to such a degree that she truly thought I was a burglar, was it possible that she didn't know who my father was? And if she didn't know who he was, did he really have a heart attack? Miss? We have arrived, miss. I wasn't asleep. I was awake as I could have been. The cabbie waited for me to get out, go into the airport, fly back home, but I couldn't. I had to know. If I left, I might never find out. So I turned back to the driver and asked him, Del Boca Diablo? His whole body tightened up. His grip held the wheel as if it was Kathy clenching my neck. His eyes drifted up to the rearview mirror to make sure he heard correctly. Si, he said, trembling as I leaned forward. Take me there. He was terrified, mumbling something in his native language the entire ride to Beaufort, lightly rocking back and forth, crossing his chest over and over again, double tapping his dangling skeleton. I tried to ask questions. explained to me why he was so afraid. He spoke about his mother and aunt who used to clean people's villas, his cousin who was a home health aide. Back then, they outsourced those kinds of things, before they kept everything in-house. The things they saw made them quit their jobs and vow to never go back. I tried to find out what they had seen, but he told me that they were things not of this life. Nightmares, he said. But you see them when you are awake, too. He was spewing words at such a rapid pace, I began to get worried about his health. At one point, he got so worked up that I told him to pull the car over to the side of the road so he could calm down and drink some water. When he regained his composure, I told him, please continue. Speak slow. There was one thing he said that was clear as day. The dead don't die in the Boca Diablo. He refused to drop me off inside Beaufort. We were sitting idle out on the main road as the lit-up security gate lurked in the background, watching us. He asked me not to go back. I tried telling him that I had to go find out what happened to my father. He was drenched in sweat. He put his finger up, indicating to hold on. He unhooked the dangling skeleton and handed it back to me. On closer inspection, it looked more like a talisman. You take. He repeated himself. He was begging me to take it. I nodded and thanked him, then I got out of the car. He popped the trunk so I could grab my backpack. My 20-year-old camouflage backpack that had somehow survived half of my life and now the end of my father's. The cab nearly peeled out down the road as I turned to look back at the place that I assumed had been left behind forever. I had no plan, but maybe that's the best strategy for going somewhere you've never really been before. I walked up to the security gate, softly waving. It was Curtis, the guard who had just come to my dad's house and was now inside the tiny booth. I went straight up to the window and knocked. He slid open the tiny slide. Can I help you? The way he asked and looked, you would have thought we had never met. I persisted. Hi again. I just wanted to give you a heads up that I needed to go grab some things from my dad's apartment. What's your name, miss? Similar to when Kathy asked if I was a coffee drinker. Either this was a weird joke or he was the world's worst security guard. Come on, Curtis. I told him he had just come to my dad's apartment. You don't remember? Sorry, miss, we need verification from your relative to let you in. He's dead, I said. You know what? What is this? What are you doing? Settle down, miss. If you just tell me who your father is, I can call him. Please, settle down. I backed up and put my hands into the air, surrendering. I hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. My body felt like it was vibrating. I could have ripped his throat out. His turkey trot hanging throat. Maybe if he shed 50 pounds and stopped being such an idiot, he could be a real cop. I could see him waiting for someone to pick up as he held the phone against his flabby ear. That ear would look good in a blender mixed with his turkey trot throat. Nobody is picking up. Have you tried calling him? You want me to call my dead father? Are you hearing yourself right now? I thought my head was going to twist and pop off my body like a cork when I turned to walk in a circle trying to play this out of my mind. When my back was to the security booth, I saw that homeless woman again, standing outside on Main Street, waving sage and chanting. She knelt down onto a tiny rug and continued to speak fast. If you don't have a resident who can escort you inside, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I spun around, took out my phone, and I held it up like a knife. You want me to call him? You want me to call my dead father? I dialed his home line and put the phone on speaker so that he could hear it ring. I stared into his dumb, swamp green eyes. If there was ever a time to prove the existence of telekinesis so I could gouge out his eyeballs, it was now. My phone rang, and rang, and rang, and I froze. That was him. That was Dad? He took a beat and then said it.
Who is this?
Have you felt the breeze whispering your name so sweet? As I stare at shadows fading soft beneath my feet, they say the time is healing, but my heart feels so cold. I reach for your hand, love, but the warmth just won't hold. If you and I drift too slowly, chasing echoes in the dark. If you and I drift too slowly, remember we left our mark. Do you hear the laughter fading, echoes from the past? As I count the moments, counting all the love we've cast. They say the world is turning, but I'm stuck in this place. I call for your spirit, but I'm lost without your grace. If you and I drift too slowly, chasing echoes in the dark. If you and I drift too slowly, remember we left our mark. In the silence of this night, I can still feel your sigh. Though the memories keep slipping, love, I can't say goodbye. If you and I drift too slowly, chasing echoes in the dark. If you and I drift too slowly, remember we left our mark.